I was not at the meeting last month because at this very time, exactly a month ago, George's funeral service was being held, and I was very much involved in that. Now, as you all know, George is a stalwart of the aviation world, and in fact he only gave up flying when he was 75 years of age and 1 day, which was a record in itself. But I've known George for about 20 odd years. Both he and I are very average golfers, and we were playing with Hammersley Hackers, and no sooner that I met George and I realised we had a lot in common, even though it was a generation apart, but we're both Air Force and we're both aviators and both shocking golfers. But the story was that George, from Tasmania, joined the Air Force in 1942, and he learned on the standard thing, the Tiger Moth to start with, which is a model that the guys have made out of the museum. Then he was on these two lovely pieces of machinery, and got some lovely stories about the Wirraway and whatnot, which I'll talk about later on. And then went on to Spitfires. And of course, in those days, they didn't have any dual-seat Spitfires, so they told him he was placed at 79 Squadron under a Spitfire, and there it is, and checklist on his lap, and 12 hours later he was fully accomplished World War II fighter pilot, believe it or not, and he got sent up to Viviani, which is up here on Goodenough Islands, and there he spent about 12 months, and needless to say there was a few funny stories about what went on there, which are covered in the stories I've written for the papers and whatnot. One of the things that happened, there were three young guys in the squadron, and when I say young, they're barely 19, 20 years of age, and the CEO was a bit worried that they're going to die as virgins, so he sent them down south on holiday, and whilst they were one of George's mates ran off the end of the runway with this aircraft, and there it is today. That was in January 1943 when it ran off the end of the runway, and a Kiwi mob went up in 1973 and picked it up and took it back to New Zealand and largely restored it, and then it sold it to the Duxton Aerodrome in the UK, and a guy with the name, I think it's Tom Blake, owns it now and flies it from one show to another. Sadly, George never got invited back to see that thing. We had a South African guy come out to the museum barely 2 weeks before George was put into hospital, and so we had all this was going on, and then Anzac Day, which was only about 2 months ago, there was a sequence of events that all fell into place, and it was just as though someone had sort of pre-planned it all. I organised transport for the old guys that are a bit too frail to march in the parades these days, so we stick them. I organised about 20 or 30 cars. I'm part of the organisation of 20 or 30 cars. And George, at the last minute, said, I don't think I can march this year. I'll come in the car. And so he's sitting behind me on that side. His wife's behind me, and I had another digger sitting on this side. And of course, as soon as we started off in the parade, all the officials are on this side, so all the accolades are coming through to me and Joan, and we're feeling quite embarrassed because it should be the people on the other side. And I nearly thought about stopping. Well, I did think about stopping and getting George to come and sit in the other seat. Fortunately, I didn't, because the ABC TV was on the left-hand side, and they zoomed in on George's face, so everybody in the state saw what was going on. When we finished the Anzac Day parade, we get to Langley Park, and we're parked there waiting for all the speeches, and who do I see walking across the tarmac but this guy here, Wing Commander Bernie Greeley, that used to be one of my students about 20 odd years ago, or certainly was at Pierce when I was there 20 odd years ago. And so I introduced him to George Gilbert. Now, this is the 79 Squadron today. George was in the very first 79 Squadron when it was formed in 1942. It was disbanded after the Second World War. It was formed again for the Korean War. I think they flew Sabres. Then it was formed again for the Indonesian conflicts, and they were in Butterworth, and they were flying Mirages. And then it formed recently for the conversion from the fighter aircraft to the high-speed jets. And so Bernie's saying, we must invite you out to 79 Squadron to come and see a graduation. And I spoke to Bernie. I said, look, Bernie, George is not well. We don't know how much longer he's going to last, but if you're going to do something, do it earlier rather than later. And sure enough, that was the Anzac Day was on the Sunday. By Thursday, George was invited out to the base. Joan didn't want to go, so fortunately I went, and we get out there, and then we are meeting all the young squadrons, and much to my surprise, these guys are 55, 60 years of age, believe it or not. They're back in the Air Force. They're flying sort of 10 months of the year with Qantas and Cathay and back in, but that's another story in itself. Anyway, so there we quickly went round the 79 Squadron, And the CO up there, the very first CO up there, Rawlinson, is the CO that George actually flew with in formation and on tasks, etc., back in 1942, 43. So we get, he said, well, we'll take you for a ride in the simulator, you see. Well, the biggest problem George had was climbing into the thing in the first place, which I must admit, even I had a bit of a problem climbing in. But once he got in, Bernie's sitting there and explaining all the bits and pieces to him, and he did a damn good job. And it's a room, I suppose, about a third of the size of this, and that wall down there is the actual vision of wherever you're going. And so you can see there, you're sitting on the end of the runway, and then the head-up display, which is what this stuff you're looking at here, Bernie's describing to George what it all meant. So you don't have to look at any instrumentation, it's all up in front of you. And I'm standing beside the aircraft, the simulator, taking photographs. And you can see, even I got the lens as I'm standing by the side, sort of watching like this, and I thought, you know. Anyway, as I say, the only problem George had was climbing in and putting the brakes on. He took off and he flew to Rottnest, and he flew around the Rottnest, down the Avon Valley, come back again. It's unbelievably realistic. And when he came back to land, he ran off the end of the runways, which is exactly what happened, you know, with his mate all those years before. But, and of course, everything is glass. It's none of, about the only thing one would recognise, at least I would recognise, was the standby compass, but everything else was sort of new. And there we are at the end of the visit. Well, within 2 or 3 days, George is in hospital. So I ring up, I rang, you know, everybody up and I told Bernie that he was in hospital. So Bernie said, oh, can I come and visit him? So, well, that's nice, you know, because he's only met him once before. And then, so he comes in on the Tuesday, and sadly by Saturday, George has passed away. So, needless to say, I said to Bernie, you know, rang him up, I told him what's going on. I said, any chance of a fly past? And he said, oh, I'll see what I can do. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we had the service, as I say, exactly 1 month ago. We had a guy by the name of John Pittman, who's involved in coordinating national disasters. He's very much au fait. He's a part owner of Perslow's funeral parlours, and he's very much involved in military funerals. So I've got the military guy running the military funeral. He's in my Rotary Club as well. And I've got Bernie organising the fly past. We had the ceremony at Pinnaroo. We had, as we marched out, we had, we're at the front with the flag, marching in the front of the entourage. We had 6 Air Force officer pilots marching beside the coffin. We had a timing coordinator off to one side. We couldn't get an Air Force bugler, but we got a Navy bugler. And as the coffin was being dropped into the grave, then he played the last salute, the last post. And as he put the bugle down, over the top came excuse me, came the Hawks. Was absolutely outstanding. And then up the back there we got George Bermanis. He and Ron Peters, they were on pilot's course with me back in 40 odd years ago, for Christ's sake. He owns Windjill, so we had the Hawk fly past and we had the Windjill fly past, and it really was a very touching ceremony, and everything sort of fell into place. And the next thing I know, between the visit and the funeral, I've written an article for the Air Mail, so the Air Force Association got the story. That came out, and needless to say, 2 or 3 days later, somehow the Air Force Command, WW11 public relations people got onto the West Australian, got onto me, and got me to write an obituary, which some of you may have seen, and I've got a copy of it here, which I'll pass around for you to all have a look at. And then here we are. This is only 2 weeks before he passed away. He never gave up having lessons or saying, oh, Bob, I've done this, I've done that. He was a lovely guy, and this is what got in the paper, and I've got a copy of that, plus there's a full page of scribble about it. So, wonderful guy. Spent, I think he got about 700 hours on Spitfires and the like in World War II. He got 16,000 hours up flying general aviation. And as I say, he gave up flying at 75 years of age on one day. I fortunately was his co-pilot on that. We flew down to Albany and come back again, and when we came back, we had the Fliers had a big sort of fountain for us to taxi in, and then it was on Channel 2, 7, 9 and 10, and that was it. So it was a fitting finale to a very interesting and a wonderful. And the other thing was his wife had developed MS, and for 20, I think it was 23 or 26 years, he was looking after her, and she got worse and worse and worse, but she survived for 26 years. It really was wonderful what he did in that respect. And he got married about 8 or 9 years ago to Joan, and when he got married, he finished up getting an extra, I think, 7 or 8 kids, an extra 21 grandchildren, and even got great-grandchildren out of that, and that was just a lovely ceremony.
What a way to go.
Yes, what a way to go. So,
of George as a young fellow, I can't get over how good looking we all were when we were at that age. And the ladies were even better.